It's Nolan. Now, before we get started, make sure y'all hitting that like button. Make sure y'all sharing it on your respective platforms. Let somebody know what we're doing today. Now, let's get into the show.
Yeah. I've been that nigga since Ride Digger, Malt Liquor, the block pillar. My 5 fingers took 4 figures. Mussolini the Great, investing in new estates. Came up digging in crates with mixtapes, intricate rhyme schemes into the mind. My lyrics imply wisdom. You catch 'em when it's in your car system. Filibuster fool, see the custom jewels, living comfy cool. Finna chuck the dudes, got a flow you can pump in your pool. Mind data, my brain work like a hard drive. Harder than hard times, I could think of apartheid. Mandela, how I beat the case like Mayweather. My main man came to take the charge like Chris Webber. Stay clever, keep a 4-5 like Brody. I'm standing at the podium, knocking niggas down like linoleum. Who know? Jimmy Kudo, no less smoother than Menudo. Practicing judo, all these rappers my kids like Juno. So elaborate, articulate in the midst of battling. Known as a solid nigga, rappers on Ruben Patterson. I'm Ben Wallace, Gary Payton glove on a pickpocket. I'm symbolic, going overboard like limb bias. No aesthetic, feeling copacetic with my sober methods. Cameras flashing when I'm rapping, guess I'm photogenic. Too mellow, I break them down like a square root. I got the world on my back like it's a parachute. Ever since a kid with crayons, open-minded, lifting up your spirits like a seance. Doing something different for the income, giving niggas opportunities, money and then some. Appetizers like them some. Power of the union, passing out game like the crackers in communion. Level up quicker than Dragon Ball with a fusion. Shit is deeper than music. I'm just speaking the language that's common to light your fuses. Little nigga marching, guess the shoe fits. Taking my picture, that's from memorial. Shit is like a tutorial. Educated, never medicated, feeling elevated. These ghetto hymns come across like I'm serenading. Can't learn nothing from a nigga that never listen. My time productivity, your head in the television. Paraphrase raps, you can turn them to a lecture. My conjecture, I'm building with niggas like architecture.
What's going on, beautiful people? It's the kid J Nolan here. Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Industry, your number one source for music, entertainment, commentary, and breakdowns. Hope everybody's doing well this weekend. All right, and we are officially here for the 10-year anniversary of Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly album. You know what I'm saying? One of the most pivotal albums made in hip-hop history. This was the album that definitely let people know that Kendrick was on a different trajectory than what anybody had placed in front of him. He went and completely diverted the sound from what he brought on his major label debut with Good Kid, Mad City. He took us to the jazz. He took us to the funk. He took us to the, you know what I'm saying, more of the DJ Quick-inspired West Coast vibes than the Dr. Dre inspired West Coast vibes that a lot of people would have expected, which, if we're going to be very technical about the history of hip hop and the history of rap, Dr. Dre's later sound post 2000 was also very much inspired by DJ Quick, because a lot of the beats that we thought Dre produced, Quick was actually doing the work and doing a lot of the mixing. But that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day, about a whole different, time period in hip hop, right? We ain't got to get into that, but big salute to DJ Quick though. If nobody else knows what you've done out here, if nobody else knows the type of work that you've done and the type of fingerprint you got on classics, just know your boy J Nolan do it here from Atlanta. You feel me? But getting back to Kendrick, I think when this album dropped, I had a totally different set of expectations than what it is that we all received. I remember when this album dropped and it was kind of like a surprise. And I was waiting on my brother to come over before I listened to it. And we sat down and we listened to it on this little like round ball speaker. And it was an interesting listen because, again, it didn't hit our expectations at the time. Number one, we expected Kendrick to be like super lyrical rap, because he gave us that on every project up until then. Not to say that he didn't have great lyrics on To Pimp a Butterfly, but the way in which he delivered his lyrics, it was different. It wasn't like, I'm finna take y'all and show y'all a master class on like lyrical. It was like, I have a certain message that I'm trying to get out here. And it was the first time that I kind of felt like, damn, if you don't get it, you just don't get it. You know what I'm saying? This wasn't like a hip hop album that was made to fit your palate. And I think the first time that I listened to it, I liked it, I enjoyed it, I understood what it was. But I was like, shit, man, I don't know how the world is gonna receive this shit. I was like, what is niggas gonna say? Niggas are gonna kill him for this, you know? But looking back in hindsight, it's some of the best music of the genre. You know, when you look at All Right and what that became as a cultural staple, when you go back and, listen to records like I Love Myself, which just got used as fucking the outro music to Captain America and their whole situation. I think it was even used in some of the trailers. 10 years later, it's still being used. You don't really see a lot of that from hip hop. You know what I'm saying? You might hear some shit from 20 years ago, but not so much 10. And used in the epicenter of pop culture with Marvel, Captain America. You know what I'm saying? But we got a black Captain America. Things change, right? You go back and you listen to records like You, which were like super polarizing when they dropped. I did not like that record when it first came out. How self-reflective it was, but like the idiosyncrasies in the beat and like the off-key um chords and like this drunken stupor version of Kendrick. I'm like, what's going on here? You know what I'm saying? It took me a while to really like take it in, and I'm sure others digested it sooner than I did. But I'm just being fully transparent with the way that this album challenged me at the time. But it showed me that it's possible to be like the opposite of what the mainstream industry, the commercial hip hop landscape is asking for, and still going out and delivering and giving people not what they asked for, but exactly what niggas needed. Personally, I believe that's the album that deserved the Pulitzer Prize, but that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day again. You know what I'm saying? So as we talk about this, I actually found two articles that are reflecting upon this time period, this album, and I want to kind of go through them. One of them is talking about the musical elements and all of that stuff, and another is talking about some uncommon facts that that played out behind the scenes in the creation of the album, with people like Terrace Martin and other contributors that have shared intimate details about it over the years. So we're gonna go through both of those, but just know this isn't my favorite Kendrick Lamar album. I've told y'all on my channel, all transparency, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is my personal favorite. I think To Pimp a Butterfly comes in number 2. I listen to it probably the most, next to Mr. Morale. Good Kid, Mad City probably comes in 3rd for me. Damn comes in after that, because Damn just had too many tracks that I don't care for. Not that they weren't good, they just not records that I want to hear. You know what I'm saying? But let's just go through this and revisit, I guess, a better time in hip hop maybe. So here we are on stereogum.com. Let me get this ad off of the screen. No, I think that's gonna stay there. They say To Pimp a Butterfly turns 10, and this article is written by Will Ketchum, who is an excellent hip hop journalist. If you don't know who Will Ketchum is, he's been around for a very long time. He's true to this, not new to this, and he's earned his stripes in the industry for coverage. So he ain't on the bull. You know what I mean? So he says, from the moment that Kendrick Lamar gained major record label recognition, he was ordained as a leader, both for his Compton stomping grounds and for hip hop as a whole. After the release of his album Section 80, the West Coast icons he looked up to growing up, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, The Game, Corrupt, formally passed the torch to Kendrick on stage at Music Box Theater in Los Angeles. And after the release of his brilliant Aftermath debut, Good Kid, Mad City, his status was further fortified. He had spiritual and religious foundations without being preachy. He had prodigious storytelling abilities, and he could still make his own brand of bangers. On the Heart Part 3, released weeks before Good Kid, Mad City, He gave thought to his impending role as one of hip-hop's new cultural generals. When the world see you as Pac reincarnated, that's enough pressure to live your life sedated, he rapped. Released 10 years ago this Saturday, his second album, To Pimp a Butterfly, was an even deeper meditation on black leadership. Released during a time in the country that desperately needed it, right? Shout out to Mortal Man and all that other shit, man. Like, there's some fucking good-ass music on there, bro. To Pimp a Butterfly showed just how far Kendrick was willing to chart his own path. When Good Kid, Mad City dropped, it felt like one of the most adventurous albums that hip-hop had to offer, a concept album about faith that employed non-linear storytelling with a lead single that warned about the pitfalls of alcoholism. But compared to Pimp a Butterfly, Good Kid, Mad City was more conventional than anyone could realize. Some of its best analogies come in television with season 2 of The Wire and season 3 of Atlanta, two series that had seemingly found perfection early on but sacrificed it in pursuit of a larger purpose. And if y'all can remember, during the press run for To Pimp a Butterfly, Kendrick was saying, I'm not chasing perfection, I'm chasing something, and I'm not going to stop until I find it. So even if I don't get it right on this album, I'm going to keep chasing it, right? And it wasn't until Mr. Morale that he said he finally found imperfection. So this was like the beginning of that journey. He said that at the Grammys, by the way, I believe. He took a hard left sonically, diving headfirst and expanding the sounds he had tiptoed in on Section 80. He employed a cadre of brilliant new gen jazz musicians like Terrace Martin, Thundercat, Robert Glasper, and Flying Lotus, trusting them to craft a sound that was distinctive, unpredictable, and diasporic. They integrated jazz, blues, funk, expertly tapping into both the commonalities and differences between multiple generations of black music. Kendrick used his voice as an instrument in similar fashion, alternating between modern rapping, improvisational scatting, and spoken word poetry. This ain't free. The album was released in 2015, 2 years into the fledgling Black Lives Matter movement that was fueled by outrage over the unwarranted killings of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and Rekia Boyd, among others. A sound so deeply steeped in blackness was essential for the time, and in that manner, Kendrick and his collaborators delivered. But Kendrick Lamar was a complicated voice for such conditions. All Right was literally a protest soundtrack, a Pharrell and Soundwave produced anthem that delivered hope and defiance, that energized the fight against police brutality. The album's powerful cover art did the same, depicting a group of joyful, celebratory black folks posing in front of the White House and on top of a judge who's clutching a gavel as his eyes are X'd out. But Kendrick was just as intentional about emphasizing that institutional racism isn't the only enemy. The Blacker the Berry starts as righteous indignation against the relentlessness of white supremacy, but ends with a call out of hypocrisy. Why did I weep when Trayvon Martin was in the street, when gangbanging make me kill a nigga blacker than me? Hypocrite. And remember, he caught a lot of flack for that line. Just that, those two bars right there made him catch a lot of flack. Everybody was riding with that song until he said that, and they said, "We don't rock with this respectability politics." Whatever. Even now, listening to the song is invigorating and triggering all at once. I aggressively rap along in agreement to virtually every word before cringing as he raps the final two bars. My point exactly. Putting police violence and gang violence on equal ground garnered backlash at the time, but the song is one of Kendrick's earliest examples on wax, where he's willing to wade into unpopular politics to make a point he's passionate about. Still, it's understandable that Kendrick Lamar was such a conflicted griot. He headed into Good Kid, Mad City feeling pressured about his leadership, and To Pimp a Butterfly finds him doubtful about whether he can have the impact that he's so intent on making. Working to stop the gang violence in his hometown has always been a motif of his work, and becoming rich and famous doesn't mean that he's insulated from its effects. The self-love lead single I is performed on To Pimp a Butterfly as a skit, and when his simulated live performance is interrupted by a fight, he angrily pleads for the crowd to stop. In 2015, niggas tired of playing victim, dog. He yells, "We ain't got time to waste time. The judge make time." Right? I love that skit. And I thought it was very interesting that he didn't utilize the actual single that was released and did a live performance of the single on the album. I thought that was very creative and another anti-industry move that most people wouldn't have done, right? On the songs Mirroring You, Kendrick finds himself holed up in a hotel room, drunkenly beating himself up for focusing so much on changing the world that he's neglecting the people he personally knows. He vulnerably laments FaceTiming a close friend who was shot instead of visiting him in the hospital before he died, and blames himself for his younger sister getting pregnant as a teenager. You preached in front of 100,000 but never reached her. He guiltily raps himself in the mirror. I fucking tell you, fucking failure, you ain't no leader. The album's coda finds him reaching out to his ancestors for guidance, visiting Nelson Mandela's prison cell in Robben Island, South Africa, before a chilling conversation with a posthumous Tupac, executed beautifully with the lost interview clip of the rap legend, which also plays out in part throughout the entire, well, leads up to that conversation throughout the entire album with the, you know, the conflicted thing. Just as he appears to establish a connection with his fellow contradictory wordsmith, Pac disappears in the blink of an eye, leaving Kendrick to deal with his difficulties alone. In the years since To Pimp a Butterfly, Kendrick has continued to grapple with his leadership in different ways. Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers deliberately attempt to separate himself from the hagiography and deification altogether, despite wearing a messianic crown of thorns on the album's cover. He abandoned the pitch-perfect bop to substance symmetry of Damn for challenging sound beds that harbored confessions of infidelity and sex addiction. He called an accused rapist, Kodak Black, to appear on multiple songs, almost as if to show that he saw himself in him in ways that most fans never would. Kendrick made you think about it, but he is not your savior, he flatly stated on the album's second volume. Not to mention on Damn, you know, right after proclaiming himself as a leader on To Pimp a Butterfly, he gets to the ain't nobody praying for me phase, basically saying, we all damned, fuck you niggas. Right? And then on Mr. Morale, we get I Choose Me, I'm Sorry, I'm Not Your Savior. Anyway, but since spring 2024, he's embraced his kingship completely. He may not be able to cure the world of all its ills on his own, but he can still run hip-hop and use that as a vehicle to do the rest. After sending early shots at Drake on To Pimp a Butterfly's King Kunta about his usage of co-writers, no, he said ghostwriters, nigga. He exposed the vulnerability in Drake's slowly debilitating approval rates and went at him with a relentless suite of diss tracks. He psychoanalyzed Drake's character and blamed him for steering hip-hop in the direction of cynicism, materialism, and inauthenticity, accepting the role that was bestowed on Kendrick over a decade earlier as the culture's ombudsman. While To Pimp a Butterfly's How Much a Dollar Costs finds him refusing to give money to a homeless man who turns out to be God, he used his cultural and financial capital to host a pop-out, a concert that platformed a dozen plus West Coast rappers to a full house at Staples Center and Amazon Prime streamers at home. He used his Instagram page to release an untitled song where he insists that it's time to watch the party die, bitterly admonishing hip-hop for its lack of conviction while looking up to Christian forward rappers Lecrae and D1. Which also is an interesting piece in his discography and just his overall growth as a man, because if you go back to Pimp a Butterfly, there was heavy, Christian thought process on the album. But then when you get to Damn, that's where he starts calling himself an Israelite and all of these different things. And people were grappling with whether or not Kendrick was a Black Hebrew Israelite or not. But ever since then, it seems that he's kind of leaned away from that ideology, which ultimately doesn't matter to me, because I mean, who he prayed to, how he processes theology isn't for me to determine, and it doesn't really affect me at the end of the day. And after defiantly leaning into West Coast culture for his most bot-ready album yet with GNX, he gave a Super Bowl halftime performance that virtually ignored the hits in his catalog to deliver a message about America's rigid fences around Black expression and hip-hop's ability to climb over them. His squabble-up lyric, fuck being rational, give them what they asked for, is largely attributed to Kendrick satisfying the public's desire for beef and bops, but it could also be expanded to mean that the people will embrace whatever Kendrick has to say. Its leadership rooted in confidence, experience, and insistence, all which would be impossible without the roller coaster ride of To Pimp a Butterfly. Now here we've got Complex, with their 10 things you didn't know about Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. And they say Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly is one of the greatest albums of the 21st century. Okay, here they state, there isn't a week that goes by on social media without someone calling Kendrick Lamar's second major label studio album one of the most profound rap albums of the 21st century, while a hater simultaneously dismisses it as overrated. A radical departure from the more street-friendly sound of his predecessor, To Pimp a Butterfly, was released on March 15th, 2015. Saw the Compton lyricist boldly experiment with avant-garde jazz. He also weaved together interlocking narratives that wrestle with generational curses and demons, dark complexions, and the lost ghosts of Tupac Shakur, with a fundamental aim of plotting out a more progressive path for Black America. Okay, we kind of got through all of these different things in the previous article, but here are some of the lesser known facts. Some people probably already know this stuff, especially if you like really locked in, but a lot of people don't. 1, Prince was supposed to be featured on the album. Prince was a big fan of Kendrick Lamar, even inviting him to jam at Paisley Park for a live performance in 2014. While there, Kendrick was able to preview To Pimp a Butterfly ahead of its release. The iconic When Doves Cry artist was obsessed with one song in particular, the Rhapsody featured Complexion, A Zulu Love. Prince said he wanted to talk about the beauty of Black people and gave us a verse. Collaborator Rhapsody said of Prince's reaction after hearing the song, I told him to say no more. What tripped me out is Kendrick originally said that he didn't want to do a verse on there himself. He wanted me to do 2 verses and for Prince to do the hook. That would have been nice. That would have been kind of crazy. Kendrick officially asked Prince to do the hook for Complexion, but when it came time to record, the pair spoke too much about Black history and lost track of the clock. We just ran out of time, as simple as that, Kendrick later said, talking about what could have been. Gee, damn. Next up, All Right, almost didn't make the album. This part I did not know. I knew about the Prince part, but not this. All Right is remembered as the defining song from the album, but the track almost didn't make the cut. Speaking about the making of the Pharrell Williams produced song on Spotify's The Big Hit Show podcast, Kendrick's frequent collaborator Soundwave revealed the trajectory of the track. He says, I just remember my jaw dropping. It was literally just the 808s and the keys, and Pharrell had the melody of We Gonna Be All Right. And I was like, bro, what is this? Oh my goodness, I'm freaking out. I immediately ran. I was like, Dot, you have to come hear this. Kendrick loved the song and recorded to it right away, but they couldn't figure out how to make it fit sonically with the rest of the album. Not wanting to lose the track, Soundwave and Terrace Martin, another producer on the album, started tweaking it. Okay, so this is probably where the sax and everything started coming in, to where that became a through line with the rest of the album. I literally had to go back in last second at the crunch time. I think we had one more day and I added drums to it, Soundwave said. He also mentioned what Martin added, saying he gave us a lot more sax parts, so we just had to pick and choose, but it was literally a freak out moment. This record had to make it. I just remember about 3 hours, just me and Terrace locked in that room. We came out and I said, I think we got something. Good thing they worked on the song, the earworm refrain of We Gonna Be All Right, emboldened young Black people to take a stand after the unlawful killing of George Floyd and to stand tall in the face of police harassment during the subsequent protests. Aside from being a timely marching anthem, the song was also designed by Kendrick to harken back to the energy of Negro spiritual songs that slaves chanted defiantly while abused and forced to work by their captors. Kendrick confirmed the track was intended to continue the energy of his oppressed ancestors and show Black people's historical endurance and hardships. 400 years ago, as slaves, we prayed and sang joyful songs to keep our heads level-headed with what was going on, Lamar told NPR. 400 years later, we still need that music to heal. And I think that All Right is definitely one of those records that makes you feel good no matter what the times are. Next fun fact. The album has a secret message in Braille. Never heard about that. For fans with physical copies, there's a hidden Braille message on the inner cover. There's actually a sketch of Braille that's added to the title hidden inside the CD booklet that I don't think nobody has caught yet, Kendrick told Mass Appeal back in 2015. You can actually feel the bump lines, but if you can see it, which is the irony of it, you can break down the actual full title of the album. Braille is found in 2 spaces of the booklet, with Sincerely written on one page and the words A Blank Letter by Kendrick Lamar written on another. Here, Kendrick showed his fascination for adding Easter eggs to his projects that only the truly determined will be able to discover. Now, of course, we know the original cover was Caterpillar, not Butterfly, Tupac, right? The original title referenced Tupac much more clearly. The thug revolutionary presence of Tupac looms heavily over To Pimp a Butterfly with the album closer, Mortal Man, rejigging a rare interview where the West Coast legend chats about America being unprepared for a new age Nat Turner-esque insurrection. The outspoken interview Pac gave to a Swedish journalist is flipped, so it instead sounds like he's chatting to K-Dot. The album's original title spelled out his connection much more clearly. Kendrick originally wanted the project to be called To Pimp a Caterpillar, an acronym for Tupac. The decision was ultimately made to replace Caterpillar to Butterfly. Kendrick talked to Rolling Stone in 2015 about this change, just putting the word pimp next to butterfly. It's a trip. That's something that will be a phrase forever. It'll be taught in college courses. I truly believe that. And I like the fact that he went with Butterfly rather than Caterpillar, because I think the Tupac thing would have just been too much. Right? Because there was already so much being related between himself and Tupac in the early stages of his career that it would have kind of seemed like too much of an obsession without creating a unique identity for himself. So I'm glad that he went the other way with that, even though it's still part of the lore of the album. Another one, they say David Bowie's final album was inspired by it. That's interesting. The late boundary-pushing British rock legend responsible for classics like The Man Who Sold the World and Space Oddity was apparently a determined student of To Pimp a Butterfly. According to producer Tony Visconti, David Bowie listened to Kendrick's project obsessively while working on his final studio album, Black Star, which was released just a few days before he passed away due to cancer. This swan song LP similarly fused jazz with rap textures. Interesting. Didn't know anything about this, and I've never heard that album. Might have to check it out just to see what it inspired. We were listening to a lot of Kendrick Lamar, the producer revealed in an interview. We loved the fact Kendrick was so open-minded and he didn't do a straight-up hip-hop record with To Pimp a Butterfly. He threw everything on there, and that's exactly what we wanted to do. The goal, in many, many ways, was to avoid rock and roll. Now, if that shit corny, I ain't gonna never come back to tell nobody about it. Another one, Kendrick didn't tour this album, and there's a very specific reason why. Unlike other Kendrick Lamar projects, there was no official tour. And according to Terrace Martin, there was a specific reason for this. We didn't do that album for popular culture. That's what Martin told Complex back in 2015. We did that album for people who have no way out. We did that album for people who can't even afford to go to the shows. We did an album for people who need hope. You don't prostitute that. The inference is that To Pimp a Butterfly was never intended as a mainstream album, but rather a one-off political statement. And given the darkness of so many of the songs, maybe it would be far too painful to play live. Interesting. The album Spiritualism was inspired by a trip to Africa. We knew that. He talks about that throughout the album as well. Yeah. While it's tempting to frame To Pimp a Butterfly as an LA album, the location that inspired it the most seems to be South Africa. Kendrick mentioned that his first trip to Africa, a 2014 visit to South Africa, during which he traveled to Durban, Johannesburg, Cape Town, was a huge influence on the project. Kendrick says the diversity of South Africa is a central tenet in To Pimp a Butterfly's sound and themes. He says, I felt like I belonged in Africa. I saw all the things that I wasn't taught. There's a separation between the light and the dark skin because it's just in our nature to do so, but we're all black. This concept came from South Africa, and yet when I visited, I saw all these different colors speaking a beautiful language. The idea was to make a record that reflected all complexions of black women. Interesting. Meanwhile, engineer Derek Mixed by Ali added, Lamar is a sponge. He incorporated everything that was going on in Africa and in his life to complete a million-piece puzzle. The fact Kendrick sampled Nigerian Afrobeat forefather Fela Kuti on Mortal Man surely wasn't a coincidence. And Fela Kuti got them jams. Okay. It helped cement the impact of an LA jazz collective. To Pimp a Butterfly is filled with live instrumentation from Kamasi Washington. Keep on horn on me, that Kamasi. Martin and Thundercat, Miles Mosley, Robert Glasper, Ronald Bruner Jr., and Ambrose Akamusir, among the talented jazz musicians who ensure the compositions all sound so richly textured. I believe one of their folks actually died in the midst of this creation, which is sad within itself. According to drummer Tony Austin, the fact Kendrick was so open to working with members of LA's West Coast Get Down Collective helped the members to launch solo careers. It was validation for us, he told Dazed. I guess when Kendrick got his time to shine, it was like, oh wow, we can all shine too. We've been riding the momentum from that Kendrick record ever since. The leader of the West Coast Get Down crew, jazz titan Kamasi Washington, said in another interview to Pimp a Butterfly changed music. It meant that intellectually stimulating jazz music didn't have to be underground anymore. Much like what A Tribe Called Quest or Guru achieved in the 90s, Kendrick Lamar ensured the 2010s could see jazz musicians and MCs strengthen their historic ties. That's a fucking fact. And to this day, there's a certain texture of To Pimp a Butterfly that you might hear in certain other artists that, you know, tap into more jazz-laden music, and it's like, whoa, that feels like To Pimp a Butterfly. You can kind of cite the source of that sound. Kendrick visited Ronald Isley personally to clear a sample. In order to clear a sample for the euphoric Isley Brothers classic, Who's That Lady, Kendrick had to make the pilgrimage down to St. Louis and get Ronald Isley himself to give his approval. That was how the rapper was able to flow on the optimistic guitar line featured on the album's first single. And of course, Ron Isley's been out here doing interviews, and he's talked about that and talked about how much he loves Kendrick and how much they, you know, have spent time together and gotten to know each other outside of just making that music. Not only did the soul and R&B legend approve, but he ended up recording howling ad-libs and making a cameo in the music video dressed like a blaxploitation anti-hero. The pair forged a friendship too, given he got to kick ideas with one of his musical heroes. It's no wonder Kendrick loved himself so much afterwards. Here they say the artwork was supposed to be optimistic, which clearly it's got to be optimistic when you got a whole group of young black men shirtless, being unapologetically themselves on the lawn of the White House with this motherfucker down there. Yeah, that's optimism for you. Shot by prestigious photographer Dennis Ruve, the cover of To Pimp a Butterfly depicts a rowdy party on the lawn of the White House as LA locals grin while standing over the corpse of a corrupt white judge. Many of the people present were real-life friends from Kendrick's childhood. Of course, we know Hitta J3. It's tempting to look at the artwork as Kendrick vindicating the idea of a violent uprising, especially in the wake of high-profile injustices like the Trayvon Martin killing. Kendrick, however, has said the photo was supposed to signify how far hip-hop has allowed him to travel. I'm just taking a group of the homies who haven't seen the world and showing them something different other than the neighborhood, and they were excited about it. That's why they have wild faces on there. Kendrick was regularly endorsed by President Obama's administration, with his artwork reflecting how street rap in Compton grew from being banned. Example, NWA's Fuck the Police, to literally sparking the brains of our most powerful political leaders. And I believe that is all. Okay? So, just wanted to go through these things, man, reflect upon this album, give it its just due. Because I don't know how many more hip-hop albums are going to have impactful 10-year, 20-year, anniversary celebrations that really are, have a depth to them. Not to say that nobody else's music has depth, but to that degree. Like, we saw J. Cole do his 2014 Forest Hills Drive concert at Madison Square Garden last year. That bitch was packed out. It was sold out. And that's dope. But even with that being a thing, we didn't really see a whole lot of reverence for it the way it should have been. But he released an excellent podcast leading up to it. The live concert was excellent. I watched it on his app. And, salute to him moving forward as well. Hope he's able to rebound. But yeah, let me know what y'all think of all this down below in the comments. Be sure to like and share this video. If this is your first time seeing me on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, become an insider. Let me know your favorite songs from To Pimp a Butterfly. You know what I'm saying? Let's have a little discourse down in the comments. Talk about our favorite elements of the album, our favorite songs, and just how the album personally may have impacted you, right, left, or indifferent, all right? Once again, I will catch y'all on the next one. Much love and respect, y'all. Peace.
King of my city and cul-de-sac. Coming out swinging like soldier rag. Leading my people like quarterback. Boy, I study this shit, I'm an almanac. Had to get up and grind. Knowledge is booming, I'm here to apply. Came with the chip and the dip, it just single the mind. We finna do more than survive. I need my check. Spinning the block for the gouda. We hitting the jeweler to flood out the net. We don't do beef on computers, I'm straight out the sewer. We come when you rest. Niggas be looking perplexed, so keeping my foot on their neck. No map, I trust my gut.